Have you ever had the feeling that something was wrong, but chose to ignore it? He also thought everything was under control until he heard that cry for help, and when he finally decided to listen, it was almost too late. Stay with me, because this story will make you think about what truly matters. If this story piqued your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. Rain lashed against the windows of the office on the 23rd floor of the City Point Business Tower in the heart of London. Inside the meeting room, 16 executives silently awaited the final word from Leonard Ashton Thompson, the man who had transformed a small tech startup into a billion-dollar empire. At 42 years old, Leonard was the personification of British success, greying temples, impeccable suits, and a reputation as a serious, focused, and visionary man. On that Thursday afternoon, he was about to sign the most important merger of his career, a deal that would place his company among the top 5 in the sector in Europe. The numbers projected on the screen in front of him were impressive. The graphs pointed to exponential growth. Everything was perfect. Everything was calculated. But then his mobile phone vibrated. Leonard quickly glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Normally he would ignore it, but something in that moment, perhaps a premonition, made him excuse himself and take the call in the corner of the room. The voice on the other end was faint, almost a whisper, a feminine voice choked with emotion, desperate. "Please, I haven't eaten in days. Help me. Get me out of here." Leonard's heart stopped. He knew that voice. He knew every inflection, every timbre. It was Marina, his wife. The woman, who was at home 8 months pregnant, on absolute bed rest as medically recommended. "Leonard, please, she won't let me leave the room. I can't take it anymore. The baby, he's not moving as much as before. I'm scared." The call dropped. Leonard was paralyzed for a few endless seconds. Around him, the executives awaited his return to the table. The contracts were ready. The pens were aligned. But suddenly, none of that mattered anymore. Without explanation, Leonard grabbed his jacket and left the room, leaving behind confused glances and murmurs of surprise. In the elevator, he tried to call the number back, but it went straight to voicemail. He tried calling the home landline. No one answered. The drive to the mansion in Hampstead had never seemed so long. The driver tried to remain calm, but sensed his boss's tension in the back seat. Leonard gripped his mobile phone so tightly that his knuckles were white. Memories of the past few months began to reorganize in his mind, like pieces of a sinister puzzle he had refused to assemble. When Marina discovered her pregnancy 9 months ago, the initial joy was quickly replaced by complications. Doctors recommended almost complete bed rest due to high blood pressure and the risk of premature birth. Leonard, immersed in business negotiations that couldn't wait, entrusted his wife's care to Beatrice Miller. Beatrice had entered Leonard's life 3 years earlier as an efficient and discreet administrative assistant. At 35, she had a calculated smile, impeccably styled brown hair, and an incredible ability to anticipate needs. She quickly ceased to be just an employee. She became indispensable. She organized his schedule, managed the household, coordinated the staff, and at some point Leonard couldn't pinpoint when it began, she became something more. The affair had started, discreetly, almost naturally. Work dinners that extended, conversations that went beyond professional matters, glances that lasted a few seconds longer. Leonard hadn't planned to betray Marina, but Beatrice had a way of making him feel understood, admired, desired in a way he hadn't felt in his marriage for a long time. Marina, in turn, had always been different from everything that circulated in Leonard's world. They met 6 years ago, in an independent bookstore in the Notting Hill neighborhood. She was a literature teacher, loved poetry, and had a worldview that contrasted with the cold pragmatism of business. Leonard fell in love precisely for that, for the way she saw beauty in small things, for the way their conversations pulled him out of the mechanical routine of work. They married 2 years later in a simple ceremony, against the wishes of his family, who expected a more strategic union with someone from the same social circle. Marina never fully adapted to the luxury of the mansion, the endless social events, the empty conversations about financial markets and investments. She kept her books, her volunteer classes in underprivileged communities, her own world that didn't depend on the Thompson surname. When Beatrice took control of the house under the pretext of making life easier for the couple during the high-risk pregnancy, Marina didn't protest. She was tired, nauseous, worried about the baby. She accepted the help. She didn't realize what was coming. Leonard didn't realize either, or didn't want to. Business trips became more frequent. Meetings stretched late into the evening. Beatrice was always present, always efficient, always available. And Marina was increasingly distant, confined to her room with her nausea and physical limitations. In the last 2 months, Leonard barely saw his wife. Beatrice reported that Marina needed absolute silence, that visits tired her, that even prolonged conversations raised her blood pressure. Leonard believed it, or wanted to believe it. After all, Beatrice seemed so dedicated, so concerned about Marina's well-being. But now, speeding through the streets of London towards the mansion, Leonard began to understand the extent of what he had ignored. The pieces were fitting together. The way Beatrice always found excuses for him not to go up to Marina's room, how she answered all the calls to the house, how Marina's doctors had been changed without him knowing exactly when or why, how Marina herself seemed to have disappeared from his life without him doing anything to stop it. The mansion gate opened automatically. The garden was impeccable as always. The imposing facade of the 3-story house revealed nothing of what was happening inside. Leonard got out of the car before the driver had even fully stopped and ran to the main entrance. Beatrice was in the hall, talking on the phone. When she saw Leonard, her face showed a flash of surprise, quickly replaced by a professional smile. "Leonard, I wasn't expecting you. I thought the meeting would go on later." "Where is Marina?" His voice came, out harsher than he intended. "She's resting, as always. She had a difficult day, many false contractions. The doctor stopped by earlier and recommended absolute bed rest." "Which doctor?" Beatrice blinked, hesitant for a fraction of a second. "Dr. Henry, you know him." Leonard knew no Dr. Henry. He walked straight past her and went up the stairs towards the master bedroom. Beatrice followed him, her voice now louder, trying to stop him. "Leonard, she really needs to rest. She can't have strong emotions right now. Please, let me check if she's awake." But he had already opened the door. The room was in semi-darkness. The heavy curtains blocked almost all natural light. There was a strange smell in the air, a mixture of medicines and lack of circulation, and on the king-size bed that was once theirs, Marina lay, so thin she seemed to have shrunk, her disproportionate belly the only evidence of life. When she turned her face towards the door, Leonard felt the floor open beneath his feet. Marina's eyes were sunken, with deep, dark circles. Her lips were cracked. Her hands trembled visibly. She tried to get up but had no strength. "Leo, you came." Her voice came out as a faint sigh. "I called, did you get it?" Leonard crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside the bed, taking his wife's icy hands. His heart pounded in his chest, guilt already settling in as an immense weight. "Marina, what is happening here? When was the last time you ate?" Before Marina could answer, Beatrice entered the room, now with a perfectly rehearsed worried expression. "Leonard, she's a bit delirious. It's normal in advanced pregnancy," the doctor explained. "She eats but vomits almost everything, that's why she's so fragile. We've done our best, but you know how difficult it is." Marina squeezed Leonard's hand with surprising strength for her condition. "It's not true. She doesn't bring me food, I ask, and she says it's doctor's orders, that I'm too swollen, that I need to fast. Leo, I'm so hungry. And the baby, I don't feel him moving like before." Leonard felt anger rise like lava. He turned to Beatrice. "Call the doctor, now." Marina's real doctor, Dr. Sanders, who has been with her since the beginning. Beatrice hesitated. But Leonard, Dr. Sanders was replaced because he didn't agree with the treatment Marina needed. "Doctor, Henry is a specialist in high-risk pregnancies. Call both of them. I want them both here in half an hour, and I want to see all prescriptions, all medical reports from the last 2 months. Leonard, you're overreacting. You're making Marina even more nervous. Get out. Now." Beatrice's mask slipped for a second, revealing something cold and calculated in her eyes. But she quickly recomposed her expression and left the room with controlled steps. Alone with Marina, Leonard finally allowed the tears to come. He held his wife's face delicately as if she were made of porcelain. "Forgive me. Forgive me for not seeing, for not being here, for letting this happen." Marina was crying too, but there was something different in her eyes now, a determination that wasn't there before. "You need to know the truth, Leo. Everything that's happening." She locked me in here, took my mobile phone, disconnected the room phone. The old maids were all dismissed, the new ones answer to her. "I only managed to call you today because one of the new cleaners took pity on me and secretly lent me her phone. But Beatrice found out and sent her away immediately. How did I let this happen? How could I have been so blind? Because you trusted her. And because she's intelligent, very intelligent. She knows exactly what to say, how to act, how to manipulate you, how to manipulate everyone." Marina paused, breathing with difficulty. "Leo, I know about you two. I've known for months." The silence that followed was dense, laden with pain and unspoken truths. "Marina, She placed a finger on his lips, asking for silence. "Not now. Now I just need you to get me out of here, to take me and our baby to a safe place. Please, I'm so scared." Leonard nodded, determined. He carefully picked Marina up, struck by how light she was. She should have been heavy with pregnancy, but she was skeletal. He carried her down the stairs while Marina clung to him, finally feeling protected after months of loneliness and abandonment. Beatrice was downstairs on the phone again. When she saw Leonard descending with Marina in his arms, her face contorted into an expression that mixed anger and panic. "What are you doing? She can't leave," the doctor said. "Any movement could be dangerous." Leonard walked straight past her. "You're fired. I want you out of this house in an hour. And get ready, because this isn't going to end here." In the car, with Marina leaning back in the rear seat, Leonard called Dr. Sanders directly, the obstetrician who had been with Marina since the beginning of her pregnancy. The doctor's voice showed relief upon hearing Leonard. "Mr. Thompson, thank God you called. I tried to get in touch several times, but they always told me Mrs. Marina was fine and didn't need appointments. I was worried, but without authorization I couldn't do anything. I'm taking her to the hospital now. Prepare a team. She is very debilitated." At St. Thomas's Hospital, Marina was immediately admitted to the maternity intensive care unit. Tests showed severe dehydration, advanced malnutrition, and signs of fetal distress. Dr. Sanders, with over 30 years in his career, was visibly shaken. "Mr. Thompson, your wife is in serious condition. The baby too. We need to stabilize her urgently. How was this allowed to happen?" Leonard had no answer. He sat in the waiting room while the medical team worked to save his wife and child. The hours dragged on. He tried calling Beatrice, but she didn't answer. He tried calling home, but no one answered. At 3 in the morning, a nurse called him. Marina was stable, receiving IV fluids and nutrients. The baby had started moving normally again, but she would need to remain hospitalized until the birth, which would likely be premature. Leonard entered the room and found Marina awake with a slightly better complexion. She smiled weakly. "I think we're going to be okay." He held her hand, unable to speak, and it was in that moment, in the silence of the hospital room, that Leonard understood his life had been divided into before and after that call. Before, he was the successful man who had everything under control. After, he was just a man who had failed the person he loved most. But the story was just beginning, because Beatrice Miller was not the type of woman who simply accepted defeat. And Leonard was about to discover how far she was willing to go to protect what she considered hers. The next morning, when Leonard returned to the mansion to retrieve Marina's clothes and documents, he found the house empty. Beatrice had left, but not alone. She had taken entire folders of financial documents, contracts, and personal bank account passwords. The office safe was open and empty, and on the dining room table, a handwritten note in Beatrice's perfect handwriting: "You made the wrong choice, Leonard. Now you'll understand what it means to underestimate me. Everything we built together, everything we shared, won't simply disappear because you decided to play hero. Marina may be back in your arms now, but ask her if she's willing to lose everything for pride, because that's what's going to happen. See you soon, darling. Fondly, Beatrice. Leonard crumpled the paper tightly, but knew that this was just the beginning of a war he himself had allowed to start. A war that would involve not only money and power, but the dignity and survival of his family. And this time, he couldn't afford to ignore the signs. This time, he would have to fight. The weeks following Marina's hospitalization were a whirlwind of painful revelations. Leonard had hired a team of lawyers specializing in corporate and family law, as well as a private investigator recommended by a trusted colleague. What they discovered about Beatrice Miller went far beyond what he imagined possible. Sitting in the law firm's office, in central London, Leonard listened to the report with a mixture of shock and growing anger. The investigator, a middle-aged man named Charles Miller, placed documents on the table one by one. Mr. Thompson, Beatrice Miller, is not exactly who she said she was. Her real name is Beatrice Smith. She legally changed her surname 5 years ago, just before she started working for you. And there's more. She has a history of relationships with wealthy married men. 3 documented cases in the last 10 years, always following the same pattern. What pattern? Leonard asked, his voice tense. She approaches, as an employee or service provider, gains trust, initiates an extramarital affair, and then begins to manipulate finances, creating emotional dependence and access to privileged information. In 2 previous cases, the men ended up divorcing their wives, and she received generous financial settlements to disappear quietly. In the 3rd case, the man discovered the scheme in time and she was prosecuted, but the case was hushed up with an out-of-court settlement. Leonard ran a hand over his face, exhausted. How did I not see this? How did no one warn me? The lawyer, Dr. Patricia Clarkson, intervened with her firm, professional voice. Mr. Thompson, people like Beatrice are extremely skilled at creating convincing personas. She studied you, understood your vulnerabilities, your needs, and she exploited that in a calculated way. What we need to focus on now is protecting your assets and ensuring the safety of Mrs. Marina and the baby. She has access to a lot, doesn't she? The investigator nodded gravely. She had access to personal account passwords, new investments, had powers of attorney that you signed without realizing. We have already identified suspicious transfers of significant amounts to offshore accounts. We are working to block and track them, but she was very careful. How much? The lawyer hesitated before answering. So far, we have identified approximately £12 million. But there may be more. Leonard felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. It wasn't just the money, it was the complete betrayal, the systemic manipulation, the way he had been used. What do we do now? We press criminal charges for embezzlement, fraud, and extortion. And in parallel, we seek protective orders to ensure she does not approach Mrs. Marina or your residence. We will also go to the media, but strategically. To the media? Patricia leaned forward, her eyes determined. Beatrice will try to destroy your reputation publicly. It's what she does when she feels cornered. She will use press contacts, social media, everything at her disposal to turn the narrative in her favor. We need to anticipate this, control the story before she does. Leonard nodded, tired. He never imagined his life would reach this point. Public scandals, lawsuits, media exposure. Everything he had carefully avoided for years in his career. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Marina was on her own recovery journey. Her body was responding well to treatment, but the emotional scars were deep. The hospital psychologist, Dr. Vera Cross, visited her daily. Marina, I want you to understand that none of what happened was your fault. The psychologist's soft voice filled the silent room. Marina looked out the window, seeing the city of London stretch out in the distance. But I let it happen. I accepted being isolated. I accepted the excuses, the justifications. You were vulnerable, pregnant, in a real medical risk situation. Beatrice exploited that. She used your condition against you, created an environment of control. This has a name, Marina. Psychological abuse, false imprisonment, intentional neglect. You were a victim of domestic violence perpetrated by someone who should have been protecting you. The words hit Marina like waves. Domestic violence. She had always associated that term with physical assaults, with punches and shouts. But now she understood that violence had many faces, and the one she had suffered was silent, invisible to outside eyes, but devastating. And Leo? Was he also a victim? Dr. Vera chose her words carefully. Leonard was manipulated, yes. But he also made choices. He had an extramarital affair. He neglected you by blindly trusting someone who showed clear signs of taking excessive control. His responsibility is different from Beatrice's, but it exists, and you two will need to decide if you can rebuild trust after all of this. Marina touched her belly, feeling the baby move. Her child was there, depending on her, needing her to be strong. I don't know if I can forgive him, and you don't need to decide that now. Focus on recovering, on having this baby safely. The rest comes later. But decisions couldn't wait long, because Beatrice was moving quickly. A week after Marina's hospitalization, the first article appeared on a popular gossip blog about the London elite. The sensationalist title read, "Tech millionaire abandons sick wife for mistress, then returns regretful and accuses employee of theft." Leonard read the article on his mobile, feeling bile rise in his throat. The narrative was completely inverted. Beatrice was portrayed as a dedicated employee who helped the couple during a difficult pregnancy and was unfairly accused and fired when the marriage entered crisis. There were anonymous quotes from supposed house staff saying that Marina was emotionally unstable and that Leonard himself had asked Beatrice to monitor her closely. "How did she manage that so quickly?" Leonard asked. The investigator on the phone, Charles Miller, sighed. "She has contacts. We've already discovered she knows several journalists and bloggers. She was probably preparing this counter-offensive for some time." "She's a professional, Leonard. This isn't amateurism." "What do we do? Dr. Patricia is already preparing an official statement, but we need Marina. We need her to be willing to speak, to tell the truth publicly. Without that, we will lose in public opinion." Leonard hung up and went to Marina's room. She was sitting on the bed reading the same article on her tablet. When she saw Leonard, her eyes were tearful, but there was determination there. "She won't win." Marina's voice was firm. "I will tell what happened. I will expose everything. Marina, you don't have to do this. It could be very painful." She looked at him intensely. "Leo, for months I remained silent. I let her silence me, annul me, but not now. Now I have a voice, and I will use it." And so, 3 days later, Marina gave her first interview. Not for a gossip blog, but for a respected investigative journalist, Claire Foster, known for in-depth stories on domestic abuse and violence against women. The interview was recorded in her hospital room, with Marina still connected to monitors, her belly evidencing 8 months of gestation. Claire Foster, a 50-year-old woman with a compassionate gaze and professional demeanor, asked the questions delicately, but without losing objectivity. "Marina, can you tell us in your own words what happened in the last few months?" And Marina told the whole story. How Beatrice gradually took control of the house, how the doctors were changed without her consent, how her mobile phone was confiscated under the pretext that she needed to rest without distractions, how food was denied under the claim of medical orders, how she was isolated from friends and family, how she was confined to her room for weeks, not knowing if anyone knew what was happening to her. There were moments during the interview when Marina had to stop, breathe, hold back tears. But she continued, and when she finished, Claire Foster had tears in her own eyes. The article was published on one of the country's largest news portals. The impact was immediate and devastating for Beatrice. Within 48 hours, the narrative had completely turned. Hashtags like "Arcus Save Marina" and "Justice for Marina" became trending topics. Women from all over the country shared the story, relating it to their own experiences of abuse and manipulation. Beatrice tried to defend herself in a live stream on social media, but it was a disaster. She appeared perfectly made up in a luxurious apartment that was clearly no longer the Thompsons' mansion, and tried to remain calm while saying that everything was a misunderstanding, that Marina was emotionally unstable and confusing care with control. But the public didn't buy it. The comments were brutal. People began to identify contradictions in Beatrice's speech, pointing out inconsistencies in her statements. Her past began to surface, with other victims of her previous schemes coming forward and sharing their own stories. In less than a week, Beatrice went from private villain to public villain, but she still held the financial cards, and she was prepared to play them. Leonard received the extrajudicial notification at his office. Beatrice was demanding £20 million as compensation for moral damages, claiming she had been publicly defamed and that her relationship with Leonard had been exposed without his consent. If he didn't pay, she threatened to leak compromising financial documents from the company and reveal intimate details of their relationship. "It's pure blackmail," Leonard told the lawyers. "Yes, it is, and we will use it against her in the criminal proceedings, but we need to be prepared for what she might leak." Leonard thought of the private conversations, the emails, the messages. He thought of how all that could be used to destroy not only his reputation, but possibly his company. "I will not give in to blackmail. She can leak whatever she wants. I'll deal with the consequences." Patricia smiled slightly, satisfied. "That's the right stance, because if you give in, she'll keep asking for more." That's how manipulators operate. It's never enough. And that's exactly what Beatrice did. She leaked edited emails, conversations out of context, trying to show that Leonard had planned to divorce Marina and be with her, that he had promised marriage and a life together. She tried to portray herself as the passionate woman who was used and discarded. But by this point, the public was tired of her narratives. And more importantly, Marina kept speaking. In a second interview, this time for a high-audience television program, Marina spoke not only about what she suffered, but about the pattern of behavior of women, like Beatrice. She spoke about the importance of recognizing signs of manipulation, of protecting vulnerable women, of not normalizing abusive behaviors even when they come from other women. If you were living this story, what would be your choice regarding the millionaire's path? Marina asked directly to the cameras. Would you forgive? Would you give a second chance? Or would you move on alone, trusting only yourself? I still don't know my answer, but I know that any choice I make will be mine and no one else's. The question reverberated on social media for days. Thousands of people commented, shared their own experiences, debated about forgiveness, about responsibility, about new beginnings. Marina had unintentionally become a symbol, not just of a victim, but of resistance, of a woman who, even broken, found the strength to stand up and speak. And meanwhile, the baby continued to grow in her belly, oblivious to the storm around him, waiting for the right moment to arrive in the world his mother was trying to make a little safer for him. Leonard, in turn, faced his own battles. At work, he had lost the merger he was negotiating on that fateful day. Some business partners distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the scandal. But others drew closer, offering support. And curiously, his public vulnerability had humanized his image. He was no longer just the cold, calculating businessman. He was a man who had made mistakes, who was paying for them, who was trying to do what was right. One night, sitting beside Marina's bed in the hospital, he finally spoke the words he had been trying to form for weeks. "I don't know if you'll ever be able to forgive me. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the man you deserved me to be from the start. Not for the baby, not for society, not for public image, but for you. Because you deserve that, and so much more." Marina looked at him for a long moment. Her face was fuller now, her color had returned. Her eyes were no longer sunken. She was recovering, returning to herself. But there was something different too, a strength that wasn't there before, an awareness of her own worth that had been forged in the fire of suffering. "Leo, I need you to understand one thing. I can consider rebuilding trust, I can consider a new beginning, but it won't be like before. I won't go back to being the silent wife who accepts everything. I won't give up my voice again. If we stay together, it will have to be as equal partners. You'll have to listen when I say something is wrong. You'll have to trust my instinct. Because my instinct about Beatrice was right from the beginning, but I let it be silenced. Never again." Leonard nodded, emotional. "Never again, I promise." They were silent for a moment, hands intertwined, the baby moving between them like a promise of the future. But outside that room, the war with Beatrice was far from over, because women like her don't give up easily, and she still had one last move to make, one that would risk everything again. Beatrice's last move came from where no one expected. One morning, while Marina was doing her light exercises recommended by the hospital physiotherapist, an unknown woman entered the room. She was approximately 50 years old, with grey hair tied in a bun, simple but elegant clothes. There was something familiar in her eyes. Mrs. Marina Thompson. The woman's voice was soft but carried weight. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" The woman hesitated at the door, as if gathering courage. "My name is Celia Miller. I am Beatrice's mother." Marina felt her heart quicken. Instinctively, her hand went to the emergency button beside the bed, but something in that woman's face made her pause. There was sadness there. And shame. "Please, don't be alarmed. I didn't come here to defend her or attack you. I came because I need someone to understand who my daughter truly is, and I need to ask for your forgiveness." Marina gestured to the chair beside the bed. Celia sat down slowly, her hands trembling slightly. "Beatrice is my only daughter. I raised her alone after her father abandoned us when she was 5 years old. He left us with nothing, ran off with a younger woman, never paid child support, never looked back. I worked very hard to give her a good education, opportunities I never had." Celia paused, swallowing hard. But somewhere along the way, she learned the wrong lessons. She saw me struggling, working 3 jobs, and she concluded that the problem was me being too honest, that women like me ended up exhausted and poor. She decided it wouldn't be that way for her, that she would use her beauty, her intelligence, to get whatever she wanted. And you tried to stop her. I tried. God knows I tried. When she started with the first married man, I fought with her, begged her to stop. But she told me I was weak, that I didn't understand the real world. We drifted apart for years. We only had sporadic contact when she needed something or when I insisted. Why are you telling me this? Celia looked directly into Marina's eyes, and in them were contained tears. Because I saw the interview you gave. I saw what my daughter did to you, and I saw my own reflection in what you suffered. I was also silenced, also made invisible by a man who swore he loved me. And when I saw that my daughter became exactly the kind of person who destroyed our family, I realized I failed her in some way. But I also realized that I cannot change who she chose to be. I can only try to repair some of the damage. How? Celia took an envelope from her bag. Inside here are documents that can help you in the case against Beatrice. They are bank accounts she holds in my name, investment certificates she asked me to sign without me fully understanding. I know she used my identity to hide money. It's not right, and I can't be complicit anymore. Marina took the envelope with trembling hands. It was heavy. Do you know what this means? Your daughter could go to prison. I know, and it breaks my heart. But she needs to face the consequences. Because if she doesn't face them now, she will continue to destroy lives, including her own. She's not happy, Mrs. Marina. She never has been. She lives chasing an emptiness she can never fill. After Celia left, Marina remained alone with the envelope for long minutes before calling Leonard. When he arrived, she told him everything. Her mother came here. She brought evidence against her own daughter. Leonard examined the documents with growing attention. This changes everything. With these accounts, we can track all the money, prove the premeditation, the planned scheme. He looked at Marina. How are you feeling about this? Marina sighed, looking out the window. Strange. A part of me wants revenge, wants to see her pay for everything, but another part feels pity. I imagine a 5-year-old girl watching her father leave, growing up with that wound. It doesn't justify what she did, but it explains it. You have a bigger heart than she deserves. Marina smiled slightly. It's not about what she deserves. It's about who I choose to be. And I don't want hatred to define me. I want justice, yes. But I don't want to become bitter because of her. In the following days, the lawyers worked day and night with the new evidence. They tracked international transfers, shell accounts, investments made with diverted money. Beatrice's scheme was far more elaborate than they imagined. She wasn't just an opportunist. She was a sophisticated financial criminal. The National Crime Agency, NCA, was alerted, account freeze orders were issued, and finally, an arrest warrant. Beatrice was arrested at a five-star hotel in Brighton where she was hiding under a false name. Images of the arrest ran on all the news channels. She walked out in handcuffs without her perfect makeup, without her calculated smile. For the first time, she seemed merely human, vulnerable, scared. Marina watched the TV images from the hospital, feeling a complex mixture of emotions, relief, sadness, and something that took a while to identify, compassion. Leonard was by her side. It's over. She can't hurt you anymore. Marina nodded, but her words were unexpected. I want to visit her. In prison. What? Marina, why? Because I need to look her in the eyes and tell her I forgive her. Not for her, for me. To be able to move on without carrying this. Leonard didn't fully understand, but he respected it. And 2 weeks later, when Marina had already been discharged from the hospital but was still resting in a rented apartment, far from the mansion full of bad memories, she went to visit Beatrice in the women's prison. The visiting room was cold, with grey walls and the smell of disinfectant. Beatrice entered wearing the orange uniform without makeup, her hair pulled back haphazardly. When she saw Marina, her expression went through several stages: surprise, anger, and finally, something close to shame. They sat facing each other, separated by a metal table. "Why did you come here?" Beatrice's voice came out hoarse. "Because I need to tell you some things, and I need you to truly listen to me." Beatrice crossed her arms defensively but didn't look away. "First, I want you to know that I know your story. Your mother told me, about your father, about how you grew up. And I'm very sorry you went through that. No child deserves to be abandoned." Beatrice blinked, surprised. "I didn't come here to seek your pity. And it's not pity I'm offering. It's understanding. Understanding that hurt people often hurt other people. But Beatrice, that doesn't justify what you did. To Leonard, to me, to others before us. You chose a path of manipulation and cruelty. And those were your choices." Marina took a deep breath before continuing. "You almost killed me. You almost killed my baby. And for a long time I carried so much hatred for you that it was consuming me from the inside. But today I came here to tell you that I forgive you, not because you deserve it or because you asked, but because I deserve to live free from this burden." Beatrice was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was broken. "You don't understand. You'll never understand what it's like to look at people like you and Leonard, and no, you'll never have that. You'll never be truly loved. You'll always be the outsider looking in. But you could have had that, Beatrice, if you had chosen to be true, to be honest, if you had sought to build instead of destroy. You are intelligent, capable, charismatic when you want to be. You could have had all of that legitimately." Beatrice laughed bitterly. "You're naive. The world doesn't work that way. People like me don't win by being honest, and look where being dishonest brought you." Marina gestured to the room around them. "You are alone, imprisoned with nothing, while I, even after everything that happened, have a baby on the way, have people who love me, have a life ahead of me. So tell me, who really won?" Beatrice had no answer. Her hands trembled slightly on the table. Marina stood up to leave. "I hope you use your time here to truly look at yourself, to understand why you made the choices you did. And when you get out, I hope you choose a different path, not for me or for Leonard, but for yourself. Because you deserve to have peace, Beatrice, we all do." When Marina left the prison, she felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Leonard was waiting outside, worried. How was it? It was necessary. She looked at him. And now I can truly move forward. The following months were about reconstruction. Beatrice's trial was swift, with overwhelming evidence. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison for embezzlement, fraud, and other financial crimes. She also had to return all the diverted money, although much of it would never be recovered. The media covered the case extensively, but Marina and Leonard deliberately stepped away from the spotlight. They focused on what truly mattered, preparing for the baby's arrival. Marina chose not to return to the mansion. That place held too many bad memories. Instead, she and Leonard sold the property and bought a smaller, cozier house in a quiet neighborhood of London. It was a house they chose together, free from the ghosts of the past. Couples therapy was fundamental. Weekly sessions where they unearthed old wounds, confronted painful truths, learned to communicate honestly. It wasn't easy. There were sessions where Marina cried with anger, others where Leonard had to face the real impact of his choices. But slowly, step by step, they began to rebuild something new. Not the marriage they had before, but something different, more honest, stronger. Leonard also made changes in his professional life. He delegated more responsibilities, hired a management team to be more present at home. The merger he had lost ultimately wasn't missed. Other opportunities arose, better ones, more aligned with his new values. And then, one September morning, Marina woke up with contractions. It was time. The labor was long, 18 hours of labor that tested her physical and emotional strength. Leonard was by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her sweat, whispering words of encouragement. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy 7.5-pound boy with strong lungs and curious eyes, both of them cried. They cried with relief, with joy, with gratitude for having made it this far. They named him Gabriel, because Gabriel means messenger of God, announcer of good news. And that baby was exactly that, good news after so much suffering, a promise of a new beginning. In Gabriel's first few months, life was chaotic as it is for all first-time parents. Sleepless nights, endless nappies, constant worries. But there was also a pure joy in it all, a sense of purpose neither of them had experienced before. Marina returned to teaching, but now online from home. At times she could. She discovered she loved the flexibility, loved being able to be present for every moment of Gabriel's life. Leonard worked fewer hours, was home for dinner, participated in evening baths, woke up for late-night feeds. They weren't perfect. There were still arguments, moments of tension, difficult days, but now they talked about everything. They didn't let resentments accumulate. They had learned in the most painful way possible that silences can be more destructive than any words. A year after Gabriel's birth, Marina was at the playground near their home, watching their son try his first steps, supported by a bench. Leonard was beside her, his hand intertwined with hers. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. Marina thought before answering, wanting to be completely honest. "I am. Not in the way I imagined it would be. It's not the perfect fairy tale life, but it's real, it's true, and yes, I am happy." She looked at him. "And you?" Leonard smiled, watching Gabriel take a hesitant step and fall onto the grass, laughing. "Yes, I learned that happiness is not the absence of problems or a life without mistakes. It's having the courage to face the consequences of your choices and trying to do better every day. And I am trying. I still have a lot to make amends for, but I am trying." Marina nodded, satisfied with the answer. It's enough. Trying is enough. Meanwhile, in a women's prison 200 miles away, Beatrice was in her cell staring at the ceiling. She had received her first visit from her mother after months of refusal. The encounter had been difficult, full of tears and accusations, but it had also been the first honest conversation they had had in years. Celia had said something Beatrice couldn't get out of her head. "You always had so much potential. You could have been anything, but you chose to be this. And that choice, my daughter, was yours alone. Now you need to decide who you want to be from now on." Beatrice had 4 more years ahead of her in prison, 4 years to think about who she was, who she wanted to be. She had started attending therapy sessions offered by the prison system, at first purely for convenience, to aid in the sentence remission process. But little by little, she was starting to truly listen to what the psychologist said. Confronting herself was painful, admitting that the choices she made were not just reactions to her father's abandonment, but conscious decisions to hurt others for personal gain. Understanding that she had become everything she hated in her father, she was still far from any real redemption. There was still anger, resentment, the temptation to blame everyone but herself. But for the first time in her life, Beatrice was being forced to stop, to look inward, to question her own narrative. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was hope that one day she could emerge as a different person. Not for Marina or Leonard, but for herself. Because in the end, we all deserve the chance to become better than we were, even if that chance comes too late to repair all the damage caused. 3 years passed since Gabriel's birth. The house in the quiet London neighborhood had become a true home, with toys scattered across. The living room, children's drawings on the fridge, and the constant sound of laughter. Gabriel grew strong and healthy, a joyful child who inherited his mother's expressive eyes and his father's smile. Marina was in her makeshift office in the guest room, finishing preparing materials for her online class when she heard the doorbell. She wasn't expecting visitors. When she opened the door, she was surprised to find Celia Miller, Beatrice's mother. The woman looked older than the last time they met, but there was a peace on her face that hadn't been there before. "Mrs. Celia, please come in." Marina opened the door completely, gesturing to the living room. "Thank you for receiving me without warning. I know it's an intrusion." "Not at all. Please sit. I'll make some coffee." While Marina prepared coffee in the kitchen, Celia looked around the house. She saw photos of Gabriel on the wall, the happiness evident in the images. She felt a pang in her heart, thinking about how her daughter had wasted the chance to have something like this. When Marina returned with the cups, Celia went straight to the point. "I came here because Beatrice is getting out of prison. In 3 months. Good behavior. Participation in rehabilitation programs, sentence remission. She served 3.5 years of the 5. Marina felt a tightness in her chest, but kept her voice calm. "And how is she?" "Different. Genuinely different. I know it might sound like I'm saying this because I'm her mother, but it's more than that. She underwent intensive therapy the entire time, participated in support groups, started taking a technical accounting course by correspondence, and most importantly, she finally stopped running from herself." Celia took a sip of coffee before continuing. "She asked me to come here. She wanted to ask your permission to write you a letter, not to ask for forgiveness or to justify what she did, but to thank you. Thank you for having the courage to report her, to expose her, to force her to stop. She says that if you hadn't done that, she would have continued destroying lives, including her own. Prison saved her from herself." Those were her words. Marina was silent for a moment, processing. "I accept the letter, but I need to make it clear that I don't want contact beyond that. Not out of anger or resentment, but because the life I've built now has no space for that past. I've moved on and she needs to move on too. I understand perfectly." And that's exactly what I told her. "You both need to live your lives separately." After Celia left, Marina sat in the living room for a long time, thinking. When Leonard arrived from work with Gabriel, whom he had picked up from nursery, she told him about the visit. "How do you feel about this?" Leonard asked, putting Gabriel down so he could play. "At peace, actually. I think it's good to know she's trying to change. It doesn't change what happened, but it's better than the alternative." Leonard approached and hugged Marina from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You're incredible, you know? Your ability to forgive, to move on without carrying bitterness. I'm still learning from you." Marina turned to face him. "And do you think it was easy? There were nights when I woke up with anger, with hurt, wanting revenge. There were days when I looked at Gabriel and remembered that he almost didn't exist because of her. But I also understood that carrying hatred would be a second prison. And I refused to be imprisoned." She touched his face gently. "And what about you, Leo? Have you forgiven yourself?" Leonard sighed deeply. "I'm trying. I still wake up sometimes and think about how blind I was, how I let it happen. But therapy has helped me understand that I was also lost back then. It doesn't justify it, but it explains it. And most importantly, I've changed. I'm not that man anymore." "No, you're not," Marina agreed, smiling. Gabriel ran to them, hugging both their legs and laughing loudly. They looked at their son, at that small being, who represented everything they had overcome, everything they had achieved. A few weeks later, Beatrice's letter arrived. Marina read it alone in her office, her hands trembling slightly. The letter was surprisingly honest. Beatrice didn't try to apologize or justify. Instead, she made a brutal analysis of her own failures, of how she had hurt not only Marina and Leonard, but countless other people over the years. She spoke about the therapeutic work she was doing, about how she was starting to understand the patterns of behavior she had repeated since adolescence, about how for the first time she was having to be responsible for her actions without being able to manipulate or escape. The final part of the letter read, "I don't expect your forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I don't expect your understanding because what I did is indefensible. But I want you to know that your courage to confront me, to expose the truth even when it was painful, was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. You forced me to stop. And in the forced silence of this prison, I finally managed to hear my own conscience. I am trying to be a better person. Not for you, not to gain anything, but because I can no longer bear to be who I was. Thank you for being strong when I was weak. Thank you for fighting when I was destroying. And thank you for surviving." Marina folded the letter carefully and put it away in a box at the back of the closet. It wasn't something she wanted to revisit frequently, but she also didn't want to destroy it. It was part of her story, a painful part, but one that had transformed her. Months passed. Gabriel turned 4 and started preschool. Marina expanded her online classes and began writing a book about her experience, not focused on the scandal, but on the process of emotional recovery after psychological abuse. It was therapeutic to put everything on paper, organize her thoughts, offer hope to other women going through similar situations. Leonard, in turn, had become a public advocate for causes related to domestic violence. He used his influence and resources to support NGOs working with abuse victims. He didn't do this to clear his conscience or improve his public image, but because he genuinely wanted to make a difference. He had learned in the most painful way possible that privilege comes with responsibility. One Saturday afternoon, Marina and Leonard took Gabriel to the park. It was a beautiful day with a blue sky and pleasant temperature. Gabriel played on the swing while they sat on a nearby bench watching. "Are you happy, Marina?" Leonard asked, not for the first time, but always genuinely curious about the answer. "You know what I've discovered about happiness, Leo? It's not a permanent state. It's made of moments, like this one, seeing our son laugh, like last night when the 3 of us had dinner, and Gabriel told that crazy story about the dragon at school, like last week, when I finished a difficult chapter of the book and you celebrated with me as if it were the most important thing in the world." She looked at him with affection. Was I happier before? When we were young, in love, without complications, perhaps? It was a simpler, more innocent happiness. But what we have now has more depth. It's a happiness built on healed scars, on conscious choices, on mature love that knows imperfections and chooses to stay anyway. Leonard took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "I didn't deserve you, I don't deserve you, but I will spend every day trying to be worthy of this second chance." Marina smiled. "No one deserves anyone, Leo. It's not about deserving. It's about choosing. Every day, I choose to stay. Not because I've forgotten what happened, but because I choose to focus on what we are building. And do you do the same?" "Yes. Every day. Then it's enough." Gabriel ran to them, asking to go on the slide. Leonard picked him up, and the 3 of them walked together through the play area. From a distance, they looked like an ordinary family with no history, no traumas, but invisible scars were there, part of who they were now. And that was okay, because scars prove you survived. That night, after putting Gabriel to sleep, Marina and Leonard sat on the sofa with a glass of wine each. The TV was off, only the soft sound of a jazz playlist filling the silence. "Have you ever thought about what our lives would be like if that phone call had never happened?" Marina asked softly. Leonard closed his eyes, thinking, "We'd probably be heading for a bitter divorce. Or worse, you and Gabriel might not be here. So yes, I think about it, and I'm grateful for every day that this wasn't our destiny. Sometimes I have nightmares. I'm back in that dark room, alone, hungry, scared. I wake up trembling, and it takes a few seconds to remember that I'm safe now." She turned to him. "But you know what's interesting? Even in those nightmares, a part of me already knows I'll survive. Because I've survived. I've been through the worst and come out the other side. So fear no longer has the same power over me." Leonard hugged her tightly. "You are the bravest woman I know." Marina laughed softly. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done even when you're afraid. And I'm learning that we are all braver than we think. We just need to be forced to discover it." They held each other in comfortable silence, each immersed in their own thoughts, but connected by physical presence. Across the city, in a small apartment in a simple neighborhood, Beatrice was finishing her last day of parole. 5 years had passed since her imprisonment. She worked in a small accounting office, earning a modest salary. She lived alone, maintained a disciplined routine, and continued weekly therapy. Her life was unrecognizable compared to what it had been. No luxury, no manipulations, no elaborate lies. It was an honest, simple life, and surprisingly satisfying in ways she never imagined possible. She had asked to see photos of Marina and Gabriel once, through her mother. Celia hesitated, but eventually showed her some public photos from Marina's social media. Beatrice looked at those images for a long time. Marina radiant, Gabriel smiling, Leonard present and involved. The family she almost destroyed, but which had survived and prospered without her. She felt sadness, but not envy. Not anymore. She had worked hard in therapy to reach this point, to understand that their happiness did not diminish hers, that it wasn't a competition, that she could build her own life without needing to steal anyone else's. Her therapist always said that redemption was not a destination, but a daily journey, and Beatrice was on that journey, one day at a time, not to be forgiven by Marina or Leonard, but to look in the mirror and recognize the person she saw. A few months later, Marina was at a bookstore launching her book. The title was Surviving the Silence, A Journey from Invisible Abuse to a Found Voice. The autograph line stretched through the store. Women of all ages, some with tears in their eyes, others with determined smiles, all sharing their own stories. One woman in particular caught Marina's attention. She was about 30, pregnant, with deep, dark circles under her eyes that Marina recognized instantly. "Thank you for writing this," the woman whispered, holding the book against her chest. "I'm going through something similar now, and your book gave me the courage to seek help." Marina held the woman's hand firmly. "You are not alone. You are never alone, and asking for help is not weakness. It's the bravest thing you can do." They talked for a few minutes, Marina giving contacts for support organizations, emergency numbers, words of encouragement. When the woman walked away, there was a determination in her eyes that hadn't been there when she arrived. Leonard, who was watching nearby, whispered to Marina, "You are truly making a difference." Marina smiled, seeing the line of women waiting. "We are making a difference, because you are also here, showing that men can change, can do better. That matters, Leo, it matters a lot." At the end of the event, exhausted but satisfied, Marina looked at the stacks of books that had been sold. Each one represented a story, a woman seeking answers, hope, validation. And if her pain could help even a single person, it would all have been worth it. Years continued to pass. Gabriel grew up, entered primary school, made friends, developed his unique personality. Marina and Leonard aged together, grey hairs appearing, wrinkles around their eyes, but also a peace they didn't have when they were younger. They never forgot what happened. It wasn't about forgetting, it was about integrating that experience into who they were, allowing the scars to be part of their story without defining them completely. On their 10th wedding anniversary, which was also 7 years after that fateful phone call, Marina and Leonard went to dinner alone, with Gabriel staying with his grandparents. At the restaurant, Leonard handed Marina an envelope. "What's this? Open it." Inside was a legal document. Leonard had created a foundation in Marina's name, focused on supporting women victims of domestic and psychological abuse. He had endowed the foundation with significant resources from his personal assets. "Leo, it was either this or renew our vows, and honestly, I thought this would make more of a difference." He smiled. "I don't need a ceremony to know I want to spend the rest of my life by your side. but I want the world to know that what you survived, what you overcame, matters, and that other women can overcome too." Marina cried, but they were tears of joy, of gratitude, of hope for the future. That same night, across the city, Beatrice had dinner with her mother in a simple restaurant. Celia was telling her about the foundation Leonard had created. She had read about it in the news. "Have you ever thought about trying to talk to them again?" Celia asked cautiously. Beatrice shook her head. "No, Mother. That chapter is closed, and it needs to be. They've moved on, I've moved on. I don't need their forgiveness to live my life. I've forgiven myself, as much as possible. And that's enough." Celia smiled, proud of her daughter who, after so much suffering and so many mistakes, was finally finding her own path. An honest path, even if difficult. More years passed. Gabriel grew up and became a compassionate and conscious young man, much influenced by the stories he grew up hearing, by the causes his parents supported. When someone asked about his family, he spoke with pride of parents who had faced adversity and chosen to grow with it. Marina published 2 more books, became a sought-after speaker, but always kept her feet on the ground. She never forgot where she came from, the literature teacher she once was, the woman who almost lost everything. Leonard became one of the main funders of social causes in the UK, but always credited Marina for the transformation. "You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness," he would often say. "You taught me that admitting mistakes is the first step to fixing them." And Beatrice? She continued her simple, honest life. She never married, never had children, but she found satisfaction in her work, in her routine, in being able to look in the mirror without shame. It wasn't the glamorous life she once imagined, but it was genuine, and that was more valuable than any luxury. Sometimes, on silent days, Beatrice thought of Marina, not with envy or anger, but with a strange form of gratitude. Marina had been strong enough to report her, to expose her, to force her to change. And change, Beatrice learned, though painful, was the greatest blessing in disguise. On the night of their 15th wedding anniversary, Marina and Leonard were in their backyard watching the stars. Gabriel was already at university, pursuing his own dreams. The house was quiet in a way it rarely was when he was a child. "Do you regret anything?" Marina asked softly. Leonard thought for a long moment. "I regret hurting you. I regret being blind and selfish. But I don't regret the final outcome, because it led us here. And here with you, with the life we built together, is exactly where I want to be." He turned to her. "And you? I regret the suffering, the fear, the moments when I thought I wouldn't survive. But I also know that experience transformed me into who I am today. It gave me a voice I didn't know I had. It showed me a strength I didn't know I possessed. So no, I don't regret the journey, even with all the pain." They remained silent, hands intertwined, gazing at the stars. And in that moment, they felt something few people can feel after so much suffering: true peace. Because in the end, this wasn't just a story about betrayal and revenge. It wasn't about villains and victims. It was about the human capacity to survive, to transform, to choose who we want to be regardless of what was done to us. It was about a woman who found her voice in forced silence, about a man who learned that success without integrity is empty, about another woman who discovered too late that stolen happiness can never be true. And most importantly, it was about the courage to start anew, to choose love over hate, to choose growth over bitterness, to choose life over the temptation to let the past define you. Marina and Leonard didn't have a fairy tale ending. They had something better, a real, honest ending, earned through much hard work and many conscious choices. And that, in the end, was more valuable than any fantasy. The stars continued to shine above them, indifferent to the human dramas below. But for Marina and Leonard, each star represented a choice, a moment, a small victory in the long journey of reconstruction. And together under that infinite sky, they knew they had found something precious, not perfection, but authenticity, not absence of pain, but presence of hope. And it was more than enough. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Marina and Leonard's story has touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of overcoming adversity, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you most. Was it Marina's courage, Leonard's transformation, or Beatrice's complexity? Every day we bring intense stories like this, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul. Stories about love, forgiveness, new beginnings, and the strength that exists within each of us. Your participation is essential for us to continue bringing these narratives that make you think, feel, and reflect. We await you in the next episode with a new story that will stir your emotions. Until then,